It's the worst economic crisis Sri Lanka has faced since its independence. But now it's finally getting a lifeline from the International Monetary Fund. The government's reached a staff-level agreement with the IMF to help improve its finances, cut debt and bring down inflation. Colombo will receive $2.9 billion in several tranches over the next 48 months. In return, the government will raise taxes, cut subsidies on electricity and petrol. It will also pass legislation to make the central bank more independent. But the reforms could bring even more pain for ordinary Sri Lankans. And President Ranil Wickremesinghe is calling on them to be patient.
I would consider this to be a beginning of a new economic era where we are committed to a very competitive export-oriented industry while maintaining and improving our social standards as well as looking after the vulnerable groups.
Chayu Damsinghe is head of macroeconomic research at the Colombo-based economic think tank Frontier Research. He says tax collection in the country is among the lowest in the world, and implementing the reforms mandated by the IMF will raise costs for millions of people.
Sri Lanka's tax levels are very low compared to most of the world. So raising those tax levels, making sure that progressively more and more Sri Lankans, especially the more wealthy Sri Lankans, pay more taxes will be a cornerstone of this. And ensuring that compliance to the tax regime also happens. So that will be a key part of it. Secondarily, what I'm talking about in terms of local positions is making sure that interest rates and exchange rates are not artificially controlled, and that there is a lot of printing of money, monetization of the deficit, so as to speak, and that has to go along with increased social spending, especially on more vulnerable communities, but do it in a way that it doesn't affect the financial stability of the system, financial stability of the country overall. Reform of the administrative system for taxation is an absolute necessity for Sri Lanka, in my view. People are skeptical not of the IMF program itself, but rather whether the government will follow through on whatever it is needed. On the streets, the sentiment is also that people have some sense of relief that there's something coming across, and there is some sense of cautious optimism. But of course, people have been burnt by their governments multiple times in the past, so that optimism is very much tempered. One very low-hanging fruit is probably when our tourism sector starts to recover. Now that Sri Lanka has always been a very attractive tourist destination, but now with the currency falling, it's probably going to be a cheaper destination as well for a lot of tourists. So hopefully, if we can get that back on track, that's probably one low-hanging fruit. Our current exports, that is garments, value-added agriculture, tea, are probably other things that we can grow out into very soon. We don't have to wait multiple years, because these are things we already have a bit of foothold in. So I'm expecting our export growth to be focused around those areas first. But hopefully, as we go along, there are other areas. For example, there is some interest in Sri Lanka's mineral sand industry, whether that can be developed. Maybe that might be something, a few years down the line that might end up being looked at a bit more seriously. There's energy that we are looking at now. The requirement of that very much seen over the last few months in Sri Lanka. So there are these other things that we are starting to look at over the next few years as well. But in the meantime, I think it's very much our current export performers doing better in the current environment with the depreciation of the currency and better market conditions for them.